China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitol Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum!
同志们，我们在轰轰烈烈的唱起来。Hello out there. Welcome to the September 14th edition of the China Watch Radio. We're calling this one the Hacking the Election edition. And we're so pleased to have you. And a couple years ago, America and China were great friends. But then President Trump threw a monkey wrench into that Sino-American relationship by slapping tariffs on China. Then, during the late hours of an election night, President Trump lost his election for president. And now China has run off with its new lover, the Russian bear. These lovers' quarrel leads us to ask, do you think it is or is not likely that China interfered in Donald Trump's election? That's a question for you to ponder today. And you're going to ponder it with yours truly, Michael Olson. We have Jaunty up in the Redwoods. How you doing, Jaunty?
Oh, great, thanks, Michael.
Good. And then we have the world-famous Billy Graff at the Santa Cruz County Fair. I know He's there because we can hear background noise.
Yes, the Twinkle Time is doing their show for the kids.
The Twinkle Time is. And I assume you're greatly amused?
I am indeed, yes.
Okay, good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, today we are going to take on the issue of the possible hacking of our election by the CCP. But before we do that, we got a bunch of stories with Jaunty leading one and Billy leading another and myself, Michael Olson, the third. And so I guess I'll just kick it off by a piece of news that you just heard on the radio, in which Xi Jinping has traveled outside of China for the first time in 2 years to visit with who? Vladimir Putin in Azerbaijan, as well as other members of the Central Asian community. But it's interesting to note that in the first place, Xi Jinping left town because he's got an election coming up in just a few short weeks that will make him emperor of China, or at least the de facto emperor of China. And so it's interesting to note that he would leave town with the election coming on so strong, and the fact that, 300 million of his countrymen are locked in their homes for COVID. That's the latest figure I heard, 300 million? Holy, that's almost America. It's incredible. So they're having a tough time dealing with COVID. They're having a tough time dealing with the real estate world. They're having a tough time dealing with food, providing enough food for the country. China has a lot of problems, and yet Xi Jinping flew to Central Asia to meet with Vladimir Putin and other presidents of the region. So it's really interesting to note why. And as I ponder these two leaders of Russia and China getting together and see that both of them are kind of in a fix, I wonder what they're asking of each other. They must be asking something of each other. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have flown to Azerbaijan to have a meeting. So put on your thinking hat for a moment and let's ponder what Xi Jinping would be asking of Vladimir Putin. I need oil, and I need gas, and I need coal, and I need food. Can you help me? And what does Putin want of Xi Jinping? Well, if you look at Putin lately has been getting his butt kicked by the good folks in the Ukraine. So I suspect, from what I've heard, his armies are in retreat, and some of them are just throwing their guns down and running for it. I suspect Putin needs some military help. So he's probably asking Putin for some... Putin is probably asking Xi Jinping for some guns and some bullets. So is that the competition these days? It seems it is. And what do you think? So that's my piece of news. Xi Jinping left the country to visit with Vladimir Putin. It is kind of interesting. So next up, who do we have? We have Jonty, who has another piece on Xi Jinping. Jonty?
Yeah, I read a very interesting article in Foreign Affairs written by Chai Zia, who was a professor at the Central Party School of the Chinese Communist Party from 1998 to 2012. Essentially, he was in contact with a lot of higher level Communist Party individuals. And I couldn't possibly unpack everything that's in this article. But if our audience is interested in getting a very in-depth picture of how the Chinese Communist Party functions, and also specifically on the personality of Xi Jinping, I would highly recommend going to ChinaWatchRadio.com and digging up this article there. It really is very enlightening in a lot of ways. So the sort of general picture that he paints here is the story of how after Mao, Deng came in and he started all of these reforms which were intended to unwind the cult of personality of single individual rule that existed under Mao, and to distribute the decision-making process. This is a flipping big country. So the idea that one person can have the cognitive abilities to manage the entire place is pretty foolhardy. So Deng tried to create a situation whereby there was more and more power given to more individuals. And when the party was electing members of the standing committee or the Politburo, the various upper echelon groups, they would actually, for the first time, they would have more candidates than seats. So there actually was a little bit of democracy going on, at least within those institutions. And also there were many instances where the so-called princelings, folks who had parents with very strong party affiliations, like high pedigree party individuals, these sons of very important folks under Mao were finding themselves actually not getting elected to positions on many occasions, Xi Jinping being one of the exceptions. And as soon as Xi made his way into power, he began reversing Deng's reforms, doing the exact opposite, essentially returning to a situation where he was the central decision-making figure. And the article's rife with examples of situations where various apparatchiks attempted very minor innovations in some cases that went against Xi's edicts, and they found themselves being punished. So it paints a picture of a single megalomaniac individual who is desperately trying to control every aspect of everybody's life and harshly punish anybody who even appears to criticize him. That being the case, we find all of these sort of strange policies going on, partly because there's no mechanism for self-reflection within the governing body. So this is why we have these insane COVID lockdowns, It also, plays into the wolf warrior diplomacy and a variety of aspects of contemporary China. Well worth reading the actual article and not listening to me blather on. Please go to ChinaWatchRadio.com and have a look at the weakness of Xi Jinping.
Yeah, a quick question, John T. It seems like in going for that cult of personality and trying to become the next Mao Zedong, or actually the next emperor of China, when it gets right down to it, because that's what he's trying to do. It seems like once you get that powerful, you can make decisions, and as you said, nobody will challenge you because everybody's afraid of telling the emperor he has no clothes. Because if you do, you probably get lost. So do you think, we've talked a lot about this Mao's Smashing the Sparrows campaign, which eventuated in the starving to death of many millions of people. Do you think we're seeing the same thing here with the COVID shutdowns?
Yes. Yes and no. The Smashing the Sparrows campaign was really just in a lot of ways stupid. We're going to kill the birds that we think are eating the crops when in fact the birds are eating the pests that eat the crops. And this causes a famine.
Yeah.
The COVID lockdowns have a cognizance to them. Something else is going on here, whereby a mechanism is being created to be able to shut down any sort of potential within the populace to resist the government. Mm-hmm. So they now have an apparatus by which if you are found by this massive surveillance state to be resisting any of the misbegotten edicts coming down from on high, then you find yourself in a COVID quarantine camp. Your little app on your phone tells you that you now have to immediately get your butt into a quarantine camp as quickly as you can. And it's also very punitive because you have to pay for the quarantine, and it's an expense which is it's something like $900 for a 3-week stay.
And everybody has to pay for their tests as well. So
in many cases, you're getting a daily test.
Yes, and everybody has to pay for them. Do you think that Xi Jinping is going to keep the country locked down through his coronation as emperor?
I think that's a large part of the intention. It'll be very interesting to see what happens after his likely, as you say, coronation, because that might be a moment in which dissent will be returning.
He's going to try.
It's a moment where, right now he's got so anybody within, this is another interesting thing from this article. Anybody within the Chinese Communist Party belongs to a group that is sort of under one of the power brokers, one of the dons of, if you use a sort of organized crime metaphor, and it's called a lineage. So Xi's lineage is called the New Xinjiang Army. That's his group that he's been able to create over these years. But there are these various lineages. And right now, he's doing everything he can to get through this election. But after this election happens, I could imagine a scenario where there's more pushback than folks within various positions of power can right now voice.
What do you think he had to say to Vladimir Putin today?
High five, everything's going according to plan.
Do you think...
I think China is not in a very strong position, but Russia is. I think unfortunately, I think you're getting some news from Western media, which is, it's unbearable with regards to the way that they describe the things that are happening in Ukraine. It's just patently false. Russia's not getting their butt kicked at all. They withdrew from a region they weren't even really defending. They had some military police in a region, and they withdrew them all because they didn't want to try and defend that region anyways. So they're not doing as badly, I think, as Western media makes it seem.
And why is the Western media so pro-Ukraine?
That's
because we don't like Russia.
The West helped stage a coup in 2014. Victoria Nuland was out handing out sandwiches to the ultra right-wing hardcore nationalists who wanted to rid the Ukraine of anybody who spoke Russian, was ethnically Russian, or voted for the prior president, who was ousted via the coup, who had a slightly more pro-Russian economic perspective. He wanted an open trade agreement with Russia. At one point, Germany was going to allow that. They were going to allow a agreement with both Russia and the EU, a trade agreement for Ukraine, but the United States interests during the Obama administration wouldn't tolerate that. So we staged a coup in Ukraine in order to force Ukraine into away from Russia, essentially. And it led to a civil war that was a horrible tragedy for the whole country. Saw their GDP plummet. Their standard of living decreased dramatically. But now we're supporting the continuation of hostilities between the Ukrainian people. The whole story to me is fallacious.
Now, how do you go about approaching all of these news items that we come across? And I look at them, and I've got one coming up in the next segment about the FBI and the election and the CCP and how it's all rolled up into this very interesting story. And I read it, and it's interesting. I don't know what to believe. And I'm not sure that we can, in a position we can believe just about anything anymore. What do you think?
Well, I absolutely love that you asked me that, Michael, and it's part of the reason why you and I are good friends. I came across a short little YouTube video by the author of the book 48 Laws of Power, Robert Greene, in which he talks about, the title of it is Why Are There So Many Stupid People? But that's not really well titled. What he talks about is how folks make decisions about things without having enough information to really be able to make an educated decision about things. So we look at, he uses the example of, you look at a couple Wikipedia articles and you think that you're an expert on a subject, and so you begin speaking as though you know what the heck's going on in some situation. And there's a level of complexity that's required to really have a deep understanding of something. And we really, as a culture, would benefit greatly if we learn to get to the point where we go, wow, this is really complex. There's a lot going on here. And until you get to that point, you're probably not really understanding something. And the corollary of that is you can tell when people aren't at that point, because they start to yell and they get loud and they compensate for their actual lack of understanding by bloviating and waving their hands.
Perhaps that's why China plays three-dimensional chess and we play checkers. Billy Graff, take us to the moon.
Well, it's interesting. I hear you guys talking about all the various things that China is involved in at the moment, the election coming up and the geopolitics with Russia and the rest of it. And China is quietly expending its energy on other things as well. One of them being they're trying to get to the moon before we do again. They're planning 3 missions to the moon. They've discovered with one of their landings on the moon that there may be a mineral that is a future energy source. It's a type of phosphate mineral. The mineral is containing helium-3, which is maybe a really important future source of energy.
And we're running short of helium, too, as I understand it.
Well, we're running short of a whole bunch of things that are easily viable to power us in the future. The batteries that we're trying to build are enormously bad for the environment when we try to make them, and so the Chinese are trying to cultivate other types of energy sources, and so they're planning 3 trips to the moon, and I find it very interesting that that it's so quiet in our media. I don't exactly know why, but we don't seem to be getting much of this in our media unless we look at some sources outside of our country, some other news sources. But the Chinese national, I love what they call it, by the way, China's National Space Administration. Does that sound a lot like NASA? Right? It's really the communist Chinese government.
Speaking of the Chinese going to the moon, did you see Blue Horizon's tourist bus blow up?
Yes.
Boom.
Yes. Look, NASA had its problems getting the last one off the ground. They had a hydrogen leak, and so they postponed that launch. And then the private firm had a problem when they launched the capsule. They ended up having to separate the passenger capsule and bring it down with a parachute.
Well, it's interesting that it seems to make more sense to go to the moon for a mineral that could lead to new energy source than to send up a tourist bus.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, by the way. We're spending a lot of energy on space tourism in the United States, and China seems to be concentrating on trying to,
strategic minerals.
Yeah. It's the old joke, you've all seen the shirt that alludes to the fact that, we'll mine the rest of the planets later. That old joke on the T-shirt. Well, China's actually trying to get to the moon first, not to say they can plant the flag and, they're saying, no, we want to get up there and get the minerals. Anyway, they're aiming to launch 3 unmanned missions to the moon after discovering that, they found this lunar mineral that might be an energy source in the future. The space race between China and the United States is accelerating after Beijing's National Space Administration got the go-ahead to launch 3 orbiters to the moon over the next 10 years. Now, that doesn't seem like too many, but, we don't have that
capability
right at the moment.
To find it.
Yeah, we're really having a hard time.
Artemis has just been delayed. And it's going to launch on September 27th, most likely.
It's been delayed.
The U.S. is currently NASA's aiming to actually have a moon base on the moon. I think it's within the decade. I'm forgetting exactly when.
Well, we're
way ahead of them.
Yeah, I just hope we get all the minerals first. We're going to take a quick break, ladies and gentlemen. This is China Watch Radio. We have Bill Graff at the Santa Cruz County Fair. We have John T. up in the Redwoods, and we have Michael Olson, yours truly, right here in the KSCO studio, flying Billy's board. It's like flying a brand new airplane. You have to figure out where the throttle is. Susan, take us away.
Satisfy your hunger right now with the delicious ramen and sushi you'll find waiting for you at Kaito. Easy in and out location in the Capitola Mall food court. Special orders welcome. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
This is Koji. I'm looking forward to seeing you at my restaurant, Kaito.
History this rich must be preserved, and the best way to preserve it is to attend the Monterey County Historical Society's 89th Anniversary Celebration Barbecue, September 18th, from noon to 4 at the historic Baronda Adobe in Salinas. Enjoy a delicious tri-tip meal with baked bean salad, garlic bread and libation, music by the Trail Ride Band, opportunity drawing, book sale, cake walk, and flea market. Tickets $40 for adults, $10 for children at the Adobe, and all proceeds go to preserving Monterey County's rich history.
Are you a company that could use some sales leads? I have a friend in Costa Rica, and he's developing some digital marketing software, and he needs some folks to test his work. For a limited time, you can have free sales leads delivered to you via a shared Google Sheet. Just call the radio station at 831-475-1080 and ask for Richard. For a limited time, you can have free sales leads delivered to you. That's 831-475-1080 and ask for Richard.
I'm Charles Friedman. Before you turn on that air conditioner up to max, give a thought to the safety of all the electrical circuits that keep you cool. Best way to check on the safety of your electrical circuits is with the help of Chris Jensen and the staff at JM Electric. Chris, what should we be watching out for?
Thanks, Charles. It is really important to be mindful of the electrical circuits that power air conditioners. Any electrical leak from these circuits is a real fire danger. You may not be able to see the electricity leaking from the circuits behind your walls, but JM Electric's state-of-the-art testing equipment can find them. And JM Electric is happy to help folks out with a free home assessment to see if the current safe testing service is right for your home. Give us a call at 422-7819.
Go straight to jmelectric.com and take the home electric safety test. After you answer 12 yes or no questions, you'll have a good idea about how safe to feel. If you don't feel safe, call JM Electric and ask for a free current safe home assessment. That's JM Electric at 422-7819. You'll sleep well at night.
Make your dreams come true with a job you love. Santa Cruz Metro is hiring bus drivers. Santa Cruz Metro will pay for your training, help you obtain your commercial license, provide excellent benefits, and a CalPERS pension. And now new bus drivers get a hiring bonus of up to $4,000. Apply now at scmtd.com. 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 Satisfy your hunger with a fresh, prepared, twice-daily grab-and-go sushi you'll find waiting for you at Sushi Market Sprouts, 2 blocks from the beach at 300 7th Avenue in Santa Cruz. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
Hello, I'm Junko, and I look forward to serving you at the Sushi Market Sprouts.
Oh, I'm back, and we're back, and Billy's back at the Santa Cruz County Fair. I hear him out there. I hear
I'm here.
A crowd in the background. What's it like, Billy?
It's actually a very nice day today. The weather's actually as good or better than it was yesterday, and the crowd is quieting down a little bit. We had quite a few kids out here earlier.
Well, I was trying to talk Jaunty into taking his family out there. What would you say to Jaunty to get him to take his family out there to the Santa Cruz County Fair?
Well, it's one of those destinations where you have to come and see it at least every couple of years, but I suggest you come every year because although it's the same in a lot of ways, there's always new stuff to see and new exhibits and additions and subtractions. This year's fair looks to be a really good one, and I think you should come out and see it.
It's a great way of tuning back into your community, and after the few years of COVID we have, it's nice to get tuned back in.
It certainly is.
So, okay, Jaunty, what do you think?
Well, what are the dates?
Through Sunday.
It's through this Sunday.
Oh, okay. Cool.
So you have time. You can pick a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds fantastic.
And then you have to talk your wife into it. But I bet you wouldn't have any trouble talking your girls into it.
That's true. Very much the case.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to China Watch Radio for the 19th. Well, gosh, what happened to this year? It's all September 15. Ridiculous, the speed with which this year is floating by. Well, we have 3 more good stories for you, and this is our focus segment, and we're going to kind of drill into the possible hack of our election by the CCP. Is it possible, do you think, that the CCP would interfere in the election of Donald Trump? That's the question we can play with today. But first, Bill is going to open us up with a very interesting piece of news about what the Chinese people don't know anymore. Billy?
It's very interesting. The Chinese public does not really know what the rules are anymore about ordinary people and the iron laws of China's state capitalism. Yes, China has state capitalism. They once trusted that there were certain rules about this, but it looks like they may be crumbling. It looked like, the whole idea may be caving in on them. The price of housing, for instance, believed to be for decades to keep rising, fell for the first time in 6 years this past spring in a situation where more than half of China's biggest cities saw a collapse of housing. The college education, once considered a stepping stone into the middle class, has now become a major contributor to massive unemployment in China. And youth unemployment is now almost 20%. In July, it was just a tick below 20%. Think about that here in the United States. If you were to say that youth unemployment was at 20%, that's a huge number. The migration from the country to the cities used to be a one-way journey where, everybody, this is a good idea. Let's all move to the city. Well, the jobless migrant workers have run out of gas, so to speak. The thing is turning around now. People are going, well, maybe we should head back to the country. It might be a better idea for our livelihood and our existence. You remember back in the day, Jonty and I and Michael have talked about this, the fact that Chinese society was based around agriculture and usually very small agriculture where families would get together and grow their own food, or they get together with a group of other small family farmers and they'd raise money. And that's how they survived. They traded amongst themselves, and it became a way of life. Well, when everybody moved to the city, that all changed. I really don't know what to say about this, because it's very scary that the society in China has moved so much in one direction and now has decided maybe it wasn't a good idea at all. Very strange situation.
Billy, you mentioned the city people who came from the country, like many of us did, and moved to the city and learned new professions, which essentially were working in factories, right?
Right.
And then let's move back to the country. But that form of agriculture that they practiced in the country, though small,
right, was
extremely intense and knowledge-centric. If you didn't know how to manage soil and rotate crops,
and the problem with that, Michael, is that type of agriculture, in many cases, because of China adopting the Western way of growing things, has gone away.
Exactly.
I mean, they can't go back to that kind of self-sufficient agriculture anymore.
Where are they going to get the know-how?
That's right.
That has been lost.
And there's one other problem that we've talked about on this program in the past, but I want to bring it up again. China's population is aging at an enormously fast rate. And there just aren't enough young people to even go back to the farm and start over.
Yeah. And you probably couldn't drive them there with a whip,
Right.
Get back to the farm. Well, they might have to do that, though. Who knows? Now, another thing I've seen about the rules of the Chinese economy is that it appears as though the central government, the CCP, is forcing a lot of their state-owned enterprises to merge, so that every state-owned enterprise that manufactures cars will now merge into one company.
Yeah, the General Motors idea.
Right. So, but what that affords, of course, is that if all the industries merge together, so all of the button makers are in one button making company and so on, that will mean that each of these conglomerates will have one person at the top, and that one person would then be easier to manage than a bunch of them. So if you're a central government run by one emperor, you would vastly prefer to have to be afforded that kind of control, rather than have a bunch of yahoos running around like Tesla, making things that you can't control.
But isn't there something to be said for competition and for different things spurring on, different innovations? If you've got only one entity doing everything, does that not stifle creativity and work?
Well, I would suspect that's why America's always been very successful. John, what do you think?
Well, it reminds me of Louis XIV of France, the self-declared Sun King, if that gives you a clue about his personality, who, when he built Versailles, his palatial palace, he did so in such a way that from his throne room, he knew what was going on in the entire palace. He could tell when people were arriving that he would eventually be meeting with. He could tell where his various cabinet members were and what they were up to. And it reminds me, it's sort of a metaphor for the state that Xi Jinping has worked very hard to create since his election in 2007. Election selection, whatever you want to call it, wherein he massively clamped down on online debate. Took the great firewall from being mostly built to sort of limit foreign interference to being something that very aggressively controlled conversation within China, and also to be able to sort of manage public discourse, and the extent to which she's pushed folks towards reading his Xi Jinping thought, and they even floated the idea of hanging his painting next to Mao in Tiananmen Square. I think that would have been a step too far at this point in his career. But it does sort of, it paints this picture of the kind of economic and social structures that you end up with under despotism is really what I would call it.
So it's kind of everything ends up being run by oligarchs, right? As in Russia, you have a few people who are running a few corporations. They get all the money. They share the money with the king or the emperor or whatever you call them. And that's the way things work. And that's why they just sit there in the mud. Nobody can make any decisions, because if you make the wrong decision, you lose your head.
You're gone, yeah.
So, Jonty, pick us up from there.
Well, speaking of the way in which decisions are made, I think folks are sort of, through this whole drama with Elon Musk attempting to purchase Twitter, I think folks have begun to realize how important an engine Twitter is for a political discourse. Now, there's a fraction of the number of people on Twitter that there are on Facebook, for instance. But the thing is that the folks that are on Twitter tend to be journalists or industry personalities, or tends to be the movers and shakers. And the way that the platform functions, it functions to foster dialogue between these disparate groups. It's not always a very healthy dialogue, but it's where an awful lot of the conversation happens. There's recently been a whistleblower. He was the former head of Twitter security. His name is Peter Zatako, and he testified in front of the Senate's Judiciary Committee this last Tuesday, and made some interesting revelations. Here, I'll just read what he said. I had been told, because the corporate security, physical security team had been contracted and told that there was at least one agent of the MSS, which is one of China's intelligence services, on the payroll inside Twitter. It was disturbing to hear. I and many others had recognized the state of the environment at Twitter. We're really thinking, if you're not placing foreign agents inside Twitter because it's very difficult to detect them, it's very valuable to a foreign agent to be inside there. as a foreign intelligence agency, you're most likely not doing your job. So he's essentially saying any foreign intelligence agency worth its salt is going to want to put agents inside of Twitter. And he also discusses a rather strange exchange with one of the executives. He said during this testimony, he said, I'm reminded of one conversation with an executive when I said, I am confident that we have a foreign agent. And their response was, well, since we already have one, why does it matter if we have more? Let's keep growing the office. So I think what's being revealed here is the extraordinary level of abuse of this platform in order to push various agendas of various countries. Now, he mentioned also an agent from India being discovered within Twitter. But I'm really glad that we're finally focusing on this. Twitter was a tool that was behind a lot of the Arab Spring. One has to sort of wonder at the degree of manipulation that's going on there. I saw a report recently on bots on Twitter. So a lot of the activity isn't legitimate. It's not an actual person sharing your story. It's an algorithm that's searching for any stories with a particular angle and then trying to elevate them in the conversation. And I read a report the other day about how the bot management of the Russia-Ukraine situation has been it was like 90% of the bots are taking this pro-Ukraine slant. It's just an example of the sort of thing that we see within Twitter. But yeah, I mean, they seem to know quite well that they have foreign agents, some of them being from China's intelligence services, and they just shrugged and said, what's the big deal?
And there you go. So I'll kind of follow. Go ahead.
You know, I've had personal experience with that bot thing. You know, I have a friend who's a sports guy, and you mention one thing on Twitter about some particular sports thing, and the next thing you know, you got a whole sub feed of all this stuff about that one topic coming at your way. So I know what Jonty says is true. The bots are controlling a lot of that.
And a lot of us, I suspect.
A lot of journalists.
Yeah, a lot of journalists.
Sure.
Well, with respect to suspicious journalism, we have a piece that Jonty found that was very interesting, titled, FBI Conceals Chinese Infiltration of U.S. Election. So we all have to put on our skeptic hats and wonder. But first, before we do, I'd like to ask Billy Graff, as a true blue Democrat, if you were a Republican, would you trust the FBI?
Look, I no political persuasion right now. The FBI has become an interesting, look, I'm speaking only for myself. I'm going to say this. They're a little scary. Yeah. They're a little scary. But keep in mind now, when J. Edgar Hoover was running it, they were scary then.
Yes, good point. Jonty, would you trust the FBI?
Well, I don't know when I did, but and I think if folks look historically at what the FBI has done, they would be very concerned. But this article, written by the journalist's name is, or their alias is KSCO the Great. Now I have to. It sounds like a bit of a funny name, but whoever this is, and I can't find them online. This is their alias, and can't get past that. They are one of the best investigative journalists out there at the moment, in my opinion. I would invite our audience to go to ChinaWatchRadio.com and dig up the full article on this.
It's worth it. I'll paraphrase it as we go here. And so in a live chat on the truethevote.locals.com, Catherine Engelbrecht and Greg Phillips discussed their 15-month involvement with the FBI on a counterintelligence operation looking into the American election company, CONEC, Incorporated. Konek, which is based in East Lansing, Michigan, builds software to manage poll workers, poll locations, campaigns, assets, and supplies necessary to run elections in the United States, Canada, and Australia. So, in January 2021, Phillips said that a cyber analyst that he's been working with found an oddity in some of the campaign URLs, which are the addresses, and such as voteforla.com and votefordetroit.com and voteforboston.com. So, and he said CONUS's poll chief software application used to gather personally identifying information. So this story relates to something we've all heard about very recently. So using Binary Edge, which is a software product company used to identify and assess the risk of cyber breaches, they said they began looking at where these URLs were actually coming from. And, surprise, found that they were coming from China. And in the Binary Edge software program, you could figure out what type of database they're using, their database port, and all the different services offered by ports in this particular application living in China. And it turned out that not only did it live there, but that's where the database, they left the database there open. And what did they find? Well, they found that the Chinese had collected over 1 million pieces of information about poll workers here in the United States. You remember that recent news item, how the Chinese, some kind of breach, let millions of poll workers' names? There it is, in China. So what did these two people do? They went to the FBI, of course, and they went to the local field office, and they opened up a actual program or actual campaign to figure out what was going on with this breach of this company that manufactures our election software. Well, they worked with the company, the FBI, for 15 months, and they said the FBI was legitimate and not a political law enforcement. They said, and I quote, "These were legitimate people who believed that this software posed a national security risk to the United States of America. And they were working with us closely to try to stop this from being taking place during the midterms." Now, can you imagine how exciting it must have been for a couple of computer geeks to discover something like this, and all of a sudden you're working with the FBI to uncover a Chinese attack on our election system? Wow, that must have been pretty cool. I bet it got the blood running. So everything was going fine. The FBI agents were meeting with him regularly, and they were talking about who's doing what to whom. But then, in April 2022, not too long ago, Engelbrecht received a call from one of the FBI agents who informed her that the FBI's Washington, D.C. headquarters was now involved in the investigation. Everything changed after the call. There was no more goodwill. There was no more let's work together. The script had been flipped, and now we were the target. That was a disturbing call, she said. The agent informed Engelbrecht that 2 women at the FBI's headquarters believed that Phillips and Engelbrecht were in the wrong for doing this, and that the D.C. office was now trying to figure out how you guys broke the law to find all of this out. So, there you are. You're working for the FBI field office for 15 months, and you're working hand in hand with them. And all of a sudden, you are the target of the investigation. So, what do? Do you get kind of frightened, I guess? That's what I do. What do you mean? I didn't do anything wrong. So what happened then is that they figured that, well, we're screwed anyway. The FBI's on us. They're going to do something to us. And if you look around, you see the FBI taking out a lot of people. If you voted for Donald Trump, better watch out. They're on the way. And so they figured, well, what we'll do is we'll just open it up for everybody to see what we've been seeing. So with the FBI out of the picture on August 13th, which is not too long ago, in Arizona, they staged an event they called The Pit, where they brought together about 200 researchers, independent journalists, and big thinkers to share their story with. So here it is, ladies and gentlemen. This is what we found. This is what the FBI is trying to hide. And Engelbrecht said, we asked the people in attendance for help. We didn't know what the FBI plans were for us. We didn't know if we didn't speak this publicly, if we would ever have the chance to, but we felt like our best chance was to share this with people. So we trusted who had the wherewithal to get the word out. So she said, there have been so many great things that have happened since that event, but one of the greatest was this community that came shoulder to shoulder saying, let's dig this up. Let's see how much more information we can find. And so the FBI is sitting on this, and people are trying to go around the FBI to get the information out about the CCP. Oh, I forgot to mention that the people who are designing this software are also the head person is also the person who's designing the communication networks for all of the Confucius institutes in the United States. So the guy that's designing our election software is the guy that was designing all the Confucius Institute software for China here in the United States.
Well, we should just be clear that it's not all election software in the U.S. It's correct. One company that was dealing specifically with poll workers and the like. So I don't think they were actually counting votes necessarily. But hey, it's there's ways to abuse that information. Well, I have no doubt.
And there's always ways to abuse you can abuse the system no matter what. But Jonty makes a very good point. It's scary no matter how much it was infiltrated.
Well, you know what's scary about it is that this is just one.
Yes.
And what we were talking earlier about how where you find one, there's probably, what was it, Twitter, right? Well, we have one. What the hell? Let's just keep building the organization and get a bunch of them. And pretty soon, they own the whole world. They own all of the information. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's our information for today. And as you know, the next hour is all yours. You have a bunch of topics on the table. Do you think it possible that the CCP would have, do you think it's likely that they could have interfered in the Trump election? It's a good question. Of course, if you speak up, you might find yourself in jail with the rest of those people who don't think so.
Or your phone turned the wrong color.
There you go. Your phone will be turned the wrong color, and you won't be able to go get any food, and you have to go to jail. But this is China Watch Radio. We ask that you pick up your phone and join us for the next hour. We're very anxious to hear what you have to say. We speculate, and you do too, and that's what News Talk is all about. So stay tuned. Thank you.
On the approach to the traffic light at Union Road. Weather forecast for tonight. Increasing clouds with lows in the mid-50s. Northwest winds 3 to 8 miles per hour. Tomorrow, patchy fog before 8 a.m., otherwise mostly cloudy in the early morning, then gradually becoming sunny with light and variable wind becoming west 9 to 14 miles per hour in the afternoon. Small craft advisory has gone into effect from just a few minutes ago through late tonight, and again from tomorrow afternoon through tomorrow evening. Boaters forecast for tonight, northwest winds 15 to 25 knots with gusts up to 30 knots, wind waves 4 to 5 feet, swell southwest around 2 feet at 15 seconds. Tomorrow, west winds 20 to 25 knots with gusts up to 30 knots, wind waves 4 to 6 feet, swell southwest around 2 feet at 15 seconds. The time now coming up on 7 minutes after 3 p.m., and that means it's time for the second hour of China Watch Radio, which is coming to you from a number of different locations, including the Santa Cruz County Fair, the Talk Studio here at KSCO, and also up in the San Lorenzo Valley, as I recall. So let's see if we can get this going again.
Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitol Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum!
Ni hao ma, woman hen hao. Welcome back to the second hour of China Watch Radio for the 15th day of September, year 2022. So happy to be here with you. We have, as Susan said, Billy at the Santa Cruz County Fair. Billy, what are you eating out there?
I'm at the moment not eating anything. I have, while I've been out here, had some fries, the garlic fries, and I've had a Cinnabon, and I've had a bunch of coffee.
Is it against the law to go to the Santa Cruz County Fair without eating a Cinnabon?
Yes.
Yes.
Pretty much. So that's what Jaunty has yet to experience, is a Cinnabon at the Santa Cruz County Fair.
By the way, there are no calories served here.
There you go.
And when his daughters have that same Cinnabon, he'll be having lots of fun.
There you go. Zooming around the place, having a great time. Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, we've put a lot of information and stories on the table for you today. We talked about how Xi Jinping left the country right before his coronation to meet with Vladimir Putin. And in Azerbaijan, what do you think those two were talking about? You think they were talking about how much they loved the United States of America? Don't think so. And we were talking also about the weakness of Xi Jinping, who is, the classic strongman dictator, following in the footsteps of Chairman Mao, who is the ultimate strongman dictator. Because, why do we say that? Well, because he killed more people than just about everybody else on Earth combined. And so Xi Jinping is marching in his boots. Now, do you think he can be the strong man that Chairman Mao was? If you look at this population right now, they're kind of disgruntled. 300 million of them are locked up. Millions have money in homes that will never be finished. The factories are closed. The stores are closed. And he's going to keep everybody locked down until his coronation so that nobody can make a move. Do you think he will succeed? 831-479-1080. 831-479-1080. Also, as Billy suggested, China is going to the moon to collect some rare earths up there. Things that have the potential to unlock energy and become an energy source. Do you think we should be going up there? Or would you rather take a ride on Blue Horizon's magic bus? We talked about how the Chinese people don't know what the rules are anymore. Can you imagine living in a country where you never know what the rules are? And that's one of the things that really struck me when I was studying Chinese here in the University of California during the time when Mao was hosting his Great Cultural Revolution. And what I come to notice or know is that there were no rules. You could be the leader of the pack one day, and then the next day they come and drag you away. And why? Well, it was never really known for sure why. Just because. And when there are no rules, when there is no rule of law, it's the rule of personality and whoever has the microphone for that day.
We don't have to have no stinking reasons.
Don't need no stinking reasons.
Yeah.
And we also talked about Twitter and how Twitter has apparently been hosting a mole. Do we know what country that mole was from, Jonty?
Well, there were several. One was from China. One was from India that he mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
He seemed to indicate that there were quite a few.
And then a very interesting story. We talked about how the FBI covered up the possible interference by the CCP in the U.S. election. We're not certain to what extent, but the people who are participating and found them in this investigation and then found themselves being the subject of the investigation by the FBI opened up their world of knowledge to all kinds of people. So who knows? Maybe with all kinds of internet sleuthing going on, we'll find out really what's going on with our election. Do you guys trust those election machines, Billy?
Not particularly, no. That's why I always do mine. I do a paper ballot in person.
Wow. Jonty, do you trust them?
Well, I don't want to touch the 2020 election and that whole hornet's nest, but in 2004, when Diebold was the big company providing electronic voting machines, the irregularities in Florida were comical. Every single county that switched to Diebold saw a 15% rise in the number of votes for George W. Bush over 2000. And every single county that did not adopt Diebold voted exactly the same way they did in 2000. So the idea to me that there can be interference in an election in the United States is kind of a moot point.
Yeah. What was it Joseph Stalin said? It's not who votes, it's who counts the votes.
Yeah.
There you go.
And you know what, Michael? The whole idea that our election system should not be examined again and made completely safe and completely trustworthy is unconscionable to me.
Yeah. Because it's that vote, that secret vote, is the bedrock foundation, upon which we build our country. When it gets right down to it, that and the Second Amendment.
Well, both of those.
Okay, so we go to the phones. Folks, the phone numbers today, 831-479-1080. And like I often say, we don't know what the hell's going on. We get these bits of information from sources that we consider to be semi-reliable. New U.S. News and World Report. And, we often like to wander into independent media, too, because they're sometimes unafraid of saying truths that the mainstream media is not allowed to say. So we travel around. We really don't know what the heck's going on, but we love to speculate and think about what could possibly be going on between our nation and that nation on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. So with that, 831-479-1080, let's go to Steve, who is in Santa Cruz. Steve, welcome aboard.
God, what a great show. Very interesting. And I think one of the most intriguing points of the stories today were those two researchers that got in bed with the FBI and sort of were going to co-create some kind of a research project together, and it showed how quickly those alphabet agencies can turn on you when it no longer serves their purpose. I don't trust those agencies, Michael Olson, because they just don't have the accountability, the transparency. They've got a whole history of working clandestine. They can actually make people disappear. They have the power of life and death in their hands. I thought that was a really interesting story about those people, and I think it's also a really good warning. I think could be a real good argument for going back to the drawing board and starting over with some of these groups. I don't trust them. What do you think?
Well, who who was it? Somebody said, when Donald Trump came into office and he was criticizing the FBI, and somebody said, boy, don't mess with them because they have all kinds of ways of getting at you.
Yeah.
And I think it was probably a pretty good observation. And as Billy was mentioning, J. Edgar Hoover had all kinds of ways of. I think he spent most of his time collecting dirt on famous politicians, so that nobody would mess with him, and they didn't.
Well,
and then Congress came, and Congress eventually came after the FBI, and there was some major significant hearings. I'm just trying to recall the details on that. But boy, it seems like something like that maybe is a little overdue here.
Well, I wanted to, Michael, I wanted to just say, my philosophy is this: those agencies, along with the government itself, were created to serve the people and the interest of the people. But what happens is they get so large and powerful, they become an entity unto themselves, serving their own their own destiny and their own continuity to keep themselves going. Go ahead. Well,
you're absolutely right. They run the world. If you're a politician, you get elected, you go to Washington, D.C., and you strut about, and people take pictures of you and whatnot. But you really don't mean much of anything because it's not you that run anything. You make policy, and you hand it to the bureaucracy to enforce that policy. Now, how that bureaucracy goes about enforcing that policy is out of your hands. So it's almost like somebody who gets fabulously wealthy, and then they decided to pass on their wealth to a foundation, and you give the foundation direction as to where you want to go. You want to go right. Well, you pass on, and 4 years later, your foundation is heading left. And
we got your money.
We got your money, and you're out of here. And it's not unlike that with a bureaucracy, a federal bureaucracy. They run things the way they want. And part of that story was that these two people were told that there are two women in Washington, D.C. who think you are the criminals. Wow.
Very intimidating.
Yeah. That's scary.
Very scary, yeah. And
I found it interesting that the field office was quite happy to investigate, but when it moves to the D.C. office, it does sort of give you the impression that there's this, I guess some people would call it the swamp in Washington, D.C., but there's this sort of nexus of power close to the top where if once you get transferred to the D.C. office, you get like a totally different personality.
Well, and that's where the politics, that's where the politicians meet the bureaucracies, right? At the very top level. You're the president, and you invite. I'll never forget the scene in the Oval Office when the new President Trump was meeting all of these officials, and James Comey, what was he, like 7'12" or something like that? He's a huge guy, and he was hiding behind the drapes.
Creepy.
It was really funny. It was a magnificent scene, and Trump walked over there and said, "Hey, hello, come out from behind the drapes." But yet, Trump said things about them they didn't like, or I actually think that they were working on Trump before he even took office. But
imagine a guy like Donald Trump, who is a really motivated businessman, high energy guy, public figure, but not a politician. He's used to
building things. He's a builder, right? He's a guy building.
He's a builder. He's sock in the jaw with his opinion type guy. He had that TV show which sort of laid out exactly what he was about. And he walks into the position of president. He says, "I'm going to drain the swamp. This place is a dumpster fire. I don't like any of you people. You're out of here." And then, guess what's going to happen next?
Yeah. So let me ask you this: how would you drain the swamp? How could we?
I have an answer for that. Try securing the border. I mean, look what they did with.
That wouldn't drain the swamp. The swamp would still be there.
No, okay, but I'm just saying, you almost have to try to do it one step at a time. I think it's a fantastic question, and I think the country is really at a pinnacle, right, a precipice right now, because the swamp seems like, well, in my opinion, Jonty might have input on this, but it seems like it just is growing bigger and bigger. And the more government gets larger and bloated and so forth, and people are becoming more and more removed from personal responsibility. What do you think?
Well, that's the key right there, is this extraordinary event that we're happening right now, where personal responsibility is something that is not applying to a certain elite, politically connected class. And that really, I see that as the extraordinary thing. And it applies to a variety of people, wherein there was somebody, I might have used this example before, I think his name was Gary Hart or something. He was a Democratic contender for the presidency back in, I can't remember, the late 80s or something like that, the favorite to win.
What was the name of the girl?
I wouldn't recall. I mean, I'm remembering something from when I was 10 here. At any rate, it came out that he had an affair, and he was just out of politics. Forget about it. We right now have a situation where even the New York Times has acknowledged that we have laptops full of data of the president's son running around doing drugs with prostitutes and making illicit deals with what are essentially foreign adversaries in order to benefit their family financially. And no one cares. Just business as usual. Yeah. So that we have this complete breakdown of accountability. I mean, we've got individuals like Bill Gates traipsing around, being in charge of things for us, thank you very much, unelected. And what he's actually done, by any reasonable measure, has been fairly well despicable, if you get into the details, which I won't. But the fact that he was best buddies with Jeffrey Epstein, he's in a situation now, he's like, wow, there are no consequences for my actions. And I think we see that as well with the arrogance of the Davos crowd. World Economic...
And what about Antifa? You can burn down cities and nobody cares. But I do have a solution for bureaucracies. And when Donald Trump first came in, and I thought, well, if you're going to drain the swamp, there's only one way to do it. And that's to open new government offices in Battle Mountain, Nevada. And you transfer everybody from Washington, D.C. to Battle Mountain, Nevada. And give them a fax and a desk phone and a tent. And there you go. I would bet you'd drain the swamp really fast. Steve, thank you for the great call. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, you guys. Great show.
All right. Let's see. Let's pick up Robert, who's way over there in one of our most beautiful cities in the world, Monterey. Robert, welcome aboard.
Well, thanks a lot. Finally get a chance to speak with you on this particular show. I've been listening for a while. But I just wanted to make a couple of comments. One on reference with the China relationship. This has been ongoing for quite some time. And, of course, the challenge is that, in order to try and persuade them to change their lifestyle or their way of life, it was going to be a bridge too far. But the political decision was made decades ago, years ago, to try and see if we could persuade that. And you know as well as I do that depends on which group gets in after the purges. So enough said on that. The second topic with reference to Mr. Trump, as distasteful as it might seem to some people, I look at it as a perspective that he's the right man at the right time for the job. It's a limited mission. It's got to be done. And fortunately, he's got the backing of the public. Now, the only challenge is the public awake enough to be able to take that chance and remind themselves that the politicians work for them. Mm-hmm. Politicians have two agendas. Not usually it's the one for the party when they get into Washington, and the other one for the constituency. We know how the markers work. All right, get something in a bill for your local homestead, but you got to do this. And that sometimes confuses people who are not involved in politics. So with that in mind, my summary on that is Donald Trump, as distasteful it might be, has to be the man to help clean the swamp with the public's backing.
Do you
Thanks
think?
a lot.
Wait a minute. No, do you think anybody else? Do you think anybody else can drain this?
Well, there is, but the challenge is going to be how long will it take, and also what are the standards. The deep state is so deeply embedded. There was a time when people in the deep state would essentially support the country, support the mission that has to be done. But unfortunately, the gate's been opened. So now you have people and agencies and what have you that feel free that they can go ahead and persuade that and no longer really support the public, okay, or the republic actually, in terms of what it was intended for. But unfortunately, that's going to take time. There are a few possibilities, but I think that's going to take longer than is going to be necessary. Now, the other part of that too, in the closing, is that it's unfortunate we've had to go partisan on this. But at some point, the public's going to say, enough partisanship. We've got to get back to what America truly represents, another time and place. But unfortunately, law of physics, equal move one way has to swing the other way. So we're going to go through it. That's essentially my observation, my friend.
Now, I have to ask you one more question before you run away, and that is, do you think China has invested itself in our federal bureaucracy to the extent that they control that bureaucracy?
Well, they under the perception, they feel that they have invested quite a bit in trying to seek more. We have to take a look at what the Chinese mentality is and what their tendency, in particular, what I'm referring to is the Chinese Communist Party.
Right.
So it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge because what's happened that with so many relationships that we've afforded into our R&D, into the companies, into the schools, they are very deeply embedded. Now, even with that, I would say that if you look at what happened during the Russian era with the KGB, and I think there was one that became former prime minister quite some time ago, I believe in the 80s, there are people in there that, despite being a member of the party, do want to subscribe to the changes that are there for that can occur. But dare they show themselves? That's a challenge. So to answer your question is yes, under their perception, they are deeply embedded. But the challenge is that you have to be careful. They have to be careful that they think that they know all of the solutions and answers. But the challenge is going to be whenever you're engaging in something like that with the foreign country, especially with the likes of America's democratic system, it might turn around and bite you when you least expect it. And they're watching closely all the elections, every move, every midterm, every action we take militarily, every action we take economically. They believe they've got it wired. Not necessarily, is my perception.
Do you think they play three-dimensional chess while we play checkers?
Oh, I believe it. In fact, it's not only three-dimensional, it is basically quantum, the chess play. There's no doubt about that. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what players do we have that can step up to the plate at some point in time and begin to reverse that. Sometimes we don't necessarily, if you have the right administration, we don't necessarily reveal all of the capabilities that we have. We want to maintain that capability because otherwise you can counter it. I mean, just like being able to take out a lot of the cyber attacks. I think you and I are both aware that there's ways of being able to do that. But do we dare lift that at the same time without knowing what further is going to go? Sometimes you have to not disclose your sources and capabilities.
Well, Robert, thank you for the great call. You can call anytime you want.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. Love your
right.
programs. Have a great day.
Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's the first half hour of our second hour here on China Watch Radio. We're going to take a quick break. Want to remind you to go to our website, ChinaWatchRadio.com. See all the great work that's been on there, all the stories, and then pick up your phone and join us. We're at 831-479-1080. What do you think our future holds with China?
A country fair with ocean air. Yes, the fair is a perfect place with the perfect summer weather. While you're here, walk through the buildings to see the best from youth groups and seniors alike. Then, head outside to 105 beautiful acres where you can ride a camel, cheer on racing pigs, get close to some interesting animals, and be amazed at Michael Mesmer's Transgnosis and Danger Magic shows. And then, tonight at 7:30, be in the grandstands for monster trucks and motocross, or in front of the main amphitheater stage for the Country Cougars.
I'll be there if you want me to. No one else I could ever do. Got to get some
Details at SantaCruzCountyFair.com. The Santa Cruz County Fair. Now through Sunday at the fairgrounds on Highway 152 between Hecker Pass and the Bay.
History this rich must be preserved, and the best way to preserve it is to attend the Monterey County Historical Society's 89th anniversary celebration barbecue, September 18th, from noon to 4 at the historic Barunda Adobe in Salinas. Enjoy a delicious tri-tip meal with baked bean salad, garlic bread and libation, music by the Trail Ride Band, opportunity drawing, book sale, cake walk, and flea market. Tickets $40 for adults, $10 for children at the Adobe, and all proceeds go to preserving Monterey County's rich history.
Here is a special message from KSCO owner Michael Zwirling.
At just short of 32 years of owning and operating KSCO with the best staff, management, and audience a radio station could ever have, it's time for me to retire and step down from ownership and operation of KSCO effective January 1st, 2023, about 3.5 months from now. It's been largely a great run, but nothing lasts forever, and when the stress and headaches of something far outweigh its joys and fun, it's time to move on and start to enjoy as much as possible of what is left of this life. Please understand that if possible, I would like to continue my association with KSCO, i.e. doing the Saturday special and occasional commentaries and voicing commercials, but after December 31st, 2022, my financial obligations and ownership responsibilities will end. Between now and then, I will be happy to review and consider any legitimate proposals, if any, I receive via email to mz@ksco.com to purchase the station, ideally by a group or individual that desires to continue the legacy of KSCO as a true free voice for everyone who chooses to use it. My sincere thanks to all who are hearing this message for your support for the last 3+ decades. For KSCO and KOMY, I'm Michael Zwirling.
Welcome back. This is China Watch Radio. Michael Olson here, sitting in on Billy's position behind the boards here, because Billy's at the Santa Cruz County Fair eating corn dogs and waffle cones and banana splits and turkey legs and Cinnabuns and garlic fries. Yeah, I know what you're doing, Billy.
I'm trying to behave myself, if the truth were known. I've had too much coffee, though, I'll tell you that.
There you go. Well, you had a long day. You've been on the air quite a bit today, so on behalf of all of us here at KSCO, thank you for all your efforts out there. And we also have Jaunty up in the trees in the San Lorenzo Valley. The trees are turning color up there, aren't they, Jaunty?
We're pretty excited to get some rain this Sunday.
Yes, I think so. Boy, that's going to alleviate a lot of nervousness around the Central Coast. Is that going to
come down to our area as well, in the flatlands?
Well, I suppose so.
I'll check.
Well, let's hope.
Yeah.
Let's hope.
Let's hope. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are here to talk about China, and I'm sure you have some thoughts about China. Any curious, not only China, but China's relationship with the United States
and with Russia.
And with Russia. And, it was really interesting to see how Xi Jinping, who will soon be coronated emperor of China on, October 20th or something like that? It's very interesting to see how he has made a complete turnabout in his approach to the West. I think he was riding along with us pretty good, but I think Donald Trump kind of threw, a monkey wrench into the operation when he slapped Xi Jinping in the face with tariffs. And so now Xi Jinping has turned his back on the West and is doing business with his new love, which is the Russian bear. So,
Michael, I did read an article that he's backing away just a little bit from Russia because of the Ukraine situation. He's kind of hedging his bets both ways, I think.
Well, of course.
Well, if you look at the situation there, right now, the U.S. government has got, according to MSNBC, sources are saying that the U.S. is mulling over a whole package of sanctions against China. Now, the timing of that seems kind of obvious to me. Xi leaves the country for the first time in 3 years, goes to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meetings, which, by the way, represents 1/2 of the world's population. This is really a pretty extraordinary organization.
But how well does it represent them?
That's a can of worms. India is the largest democracy in the world, and it's one of the countries that participates. Everybody knows that Putin and Xi are going to have a conversation there, and so at the same time, the U.S. is just letting the CCP know that we're mulling over a package of sanctions. Europe is as well. Just to lay that out there, which is, in my mind, it has very little to do with Taiwan. It has everything to do with trying to manipulate the relationship between Xi and Putin to our advantage.
Sure.
Well, now, do you think Xi Jinping can get everything he wants by turning his back on the West for the Russian bear? Do you think everything is there for him? I don't know. What do you think out there, folks? 831-479-1080. Pick up your phone and join us. We'd love to hear from you. Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin today getting together and talking smack about us, I'm sure. So what are we going to do about that? Are we going to keep buying made in China? We seem
I think for sure we're going to end up being the focal point of both those countries, don't you think? They're going to try to aim the guns at us, so to speak, the economic guns and everything else right at us. We're the country they love to hate.
Well, there's an intention to unwind the unipolarity that the United States has enjoyed since the end of the Cold War.
And
I'm not totally against that concept. If we had a healthier democracy over here, if George W. Bush and Dick Cheney were actually tried for the war crimes that they committed, for instance, then I might have a different feeling about it. But I think that there are legitimate concerns about some of the actions of the United States in the last 22 years.
Do you think it's possible to be president of a major power without committing war crimes?
Yes.
Oh.
I think we've had many presidents who would fall into... that might be a little challenging. It depends. It depends how aggressive you prosecute.
John T. There
Jimmy
are examples,
Carter,
for instance.
Jimmy Carter. Under Jimmy Carter's reign, the United States provided M16s and ammunition to the Indonesian military that then went and slaughtered tens of thousands of East Timorese.
So it's almost no matter what you do, somebody's gonna get hurt.
Well, how about New Zealand? New Zealand's been a country for long time, and I don't know that they've ever done anything really heinous.
Well, look, lying to the United Nations in order to invade a country which then results in estimates range between 150,000 and 1 million fatalities, is it's a pretty aggressive bit of behavior.
Well, with that,
to let slide.
Yeah, with that, let's head to the phones. We have Mary up first. Mary, welcome to China Watch Radio.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Always good to hear your show. I think Putin went to visit with China because China has not been paying the war bills.
Oh.
Ooh. I think China went to visit with Putin because they can't support Putin's war as they may have promised.
Do you think, Mary, do you think part of the reason that China can't support Putin's war is because Putin does not appear to be winning to the extent that he should be winning?
I think that's part of it, but if you look at how badly they're getting their asses kicked, and how they're not bringing enough war equipment.
That's what I thought. I suspect
they're not able to provide all of the resources that they need to win the Ukraine war. I suspect that Putin had a promise from China, which China always does. It goes into a country, we'll give you this, we'll give you that. You let us take over your country, all is good. And I think China's had a hell of a time with their economy here lately. I don't think they can fund Putin.
Well, that's an interesting observation. Jonty, what do you think?
I mean, the China and Russian trade is very strong right now. It's increased something like 25%. Russia has been able to offset the economic costs of sanctions from the West by transitioning to selling oil to India and China, who are both quite happy to participate in trade with Russia. Russia's doing pretty darn well economically. The ruble's very strong. They have some supply chain issues. One of them that China would be critical for is semiconductors. But Russia's actually doing very well in the very limited operation that they're conducting in the Ukraine. They've got a military that's about 1.5 million, and they limited their engagement there to 200,000 roundabouts.
It's kind of like their Vietnam War.
I wouldn't really say that. The United States was fairly aggressive with Hanoi. We were carpet bombing all over the place. Russia has gone to great lengths to protect civilian infrastructure in Ukraine.
Well, I've heard that they've just been bombing all the water facilities and the electric generation facilities.
Well, you know what happened, and this isn't, I don't think you'll ever see this on U.S. mainstream news, is that the Ukrainians took one of these HIMARS systems, the longer range rocket systems, and they struck a Russian power generating facility in Russia, close to Belgrade. And this was kind of like, okay, guys, last straw. Uh-huh. And as a result of that attack, Russia has just recently done what the U.S. did to Iraq on day one, which is attack their energy production facilities.
Okay, Mary, do you have a follow-up?
I suggest to you that the Russians have lost a lot of ground in the Ukraine. What we're seeing is that they have at least done so in the American media news and the information that we're getting. Yeah. I don't think this war has gone anywhere close to what Putin wanted it to be. And I think, again, he's getting his ass kicked. So I stand by my statement.
I have a theory that you all might find interesting, which is that Russia's strategy here is only partly military, and that the far more critical aspect of their strategy is geopolitical, specifically with regards to Europe. And the intention is to prolong the conflict in order to allow Europe to shift politically as a result of their abrupt economic collapse.
There you go.
And then loose themselves from the shackles of NATO. This is what he's talking about, where he wants to end the unipolar world. A lot of that has to do with ending Europe's
attachment,
reliance and attachment to the United States.
And there's a lot of sense in that, because Germany is in deep doo-doo, and it's going to be in deeper doo-doo this winter. So we'll see how that works out. Mary, thank you so much for the call.
Sure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
She makes some very good points, though. The fact that geopolitically, it's a very important situation we see coming up in the next couple of years.
Yep. Who knows how it's going to shake out? It's a time of great change. Maybe Chuck has an idea. Chuck, how things in Marina today? Are you having a beautiful day over there?
It is. It's a beautiful, warm, sunny day. I'm enjoying this climate change.
Amen to that.
Anyway, so I wanted to address the question presented, which was, how do you think, which direction, how do you think the China-U.S. relationship is going to pan out? So my opinion is this. Years back, there was a news article that cameras installed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky had to be removed. They were Chinese product. And they weren't cameras in sensitive areas. They were probably, like on the light post, what have you. But they had to be removed because it was discovered that there was some kind of eavesdropping capabilities within those cameras. So they had to tear them out and put new ones in. Then there's Smithfield, the pork producing company, about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, sold out. Pretty big company, national company, pork company, sold it to a Chinese company. There's infiltration.
Smithfield's Foods? Smithfield is, I think, the world's largest producer of pork.
Right. Well, now it has been Chinese-owned.
Yep.
And then, that list goes on. There's, medication. China produces medication. Tylenol, I think I read 90-some% of Tylenol comes from China.
And India, too.
And India, too, correct. But the touch screens, all those touch screens in military aircraft, U.S. doesn't make any of that or those components. Mostly Taiwan, South Korea, and I suspect some parts from China. But just go to Harbor Freight. Everything is Chinese. So, everything's a weapon. Food, water, medicine, everything. And, I don't know, your guest mentioned something about U.S. Hinting about sanctions on China, but, it's like Trump at that NATO conference saying, hey, you better think about your reliance, your natural gas reliance on Russia, because when things go south, all they're going to do is turn the valve off. And he was mocked. He was laughed at. And look at him now. And that's the same thing, that China will do to us in the event of any sort of hostility or even sanctions. If they have the upper hand, they will do what Russia is doing to the EU, to us.
Sure.
And then can I ask a question about that conflict, the Ukraine-Russia conflict?
Sure, go ahead.
I didn't call about that. So I've been reading and I've seen maps and I've read that Russia has conquered 120,000 kilometers of land. And the map that I saw, it was a pretty big swath that went from Donbass all the way down to Crimea. It was pretty thick swath of land, too. And I read that this last offensive, Ukrainian offensive, recaptured 1.6% of that land. And the map showed this, so the big red swath going from Donbass down to Crimea. And this tiny little dot in the upper west was the recaptured Ukrainian, 1.6%. Does your guest have any information on that?
No, but John T. probably does.
I think it's more than 1.6%, but it's I don't believe it's very strategically important. Ukraine is a big flat place. The Russians captured an area roughly the size of the UK, just to put it in perspective. And this was their major failure that everyone said happened. But the strategically critical area that they're interested in is the Donbas region, and then having enough room around Crimea just to keep that area safe and make sure that the water stays on for the Crimean farmers.
Yeah. And
one source of water.
They also have a bridge there that connects Russia with Crimea. That is the Russian sole way of getting in and out of there. And it's interesting that the Ukrainians haven't done anything to disrupt that flow.
Yeah.
And another argument I hear is that Russia was trying to create a land bridge down to Crimea in order to access the Black Sea. And, based on that map that I saw, it looks like they did that already. But when you look at the Black Sea over to the west, there's a severe choke point, which is, I can't remember the countries, but if you look on the map, you'll see it. Turkey and Istanbul.
Istanbul.
That's right.
Anyway, super tight choke point there, which would be, a strategic nightmare to get Russian vessels through if they're not friendly with those two countries. And I don't know
Turkey's the second largest military in NATO, but Turkey is probably the least enthusiastic country about NATO. And Turkey has been engaged constantly diplomatically with Russia. They're pretty fed up with a variety of things, including events in Syria, right on their border. The U.S.'s support for the YPG, the Kurdish military in Syria. Things have been building up with Turkey for a long time.
From the beginning.
Turkey has some agreement that they allow they allow trade through the the isthmus, the Dardanelles. They've got a very rigid agreement about exactly when and if they allow trade or military ships through there, and they're pretty open about doing it at the moment. I mean, Russia's got a fleet stationed in Syria, I believe.
Yeah.
Wasn't Turkey one of those? Wasn't Turkey one of the nations that Trump was talking about paying their bill for NATO?
I think he was directing that more to Germany, maybe Poland, those EU countries.
Yeah.
That's where that was directed. That's what I understood. But if Russia can gain, favorable status with those countries north and south of that, you just named it, that isthmus, that little thin entry into the Black Sea. Then I can understand that land bridge from Russia to Crimea.
Well, Russia's been on great terms. They're secured. They're secured. There's going to be traffic through Turkey, regardless. But unless something dramatic happened. But something interesting to take note of is that Azerbaijan just started firing on Armenia.
Saw that.
And so we've got Turkey trying very hard to work with Russia to help them set up a system by which to. They actually worked with Ukraine to try to get the Ukrainians to be able to ship grain out. Russia's was allowing this to happen. I don't know where the negotiations are now. So Turkey's here being very sort of, I don't know, more balanced in their perspective with regards to Russia. Let's just put it that way. Maybe that's my bias. But now we have Turkey's ally, Azerbaijan, attacking Russia's ally, Armenia, at the same time. So who knows what's going to happen there.
Is that a Christian Islam thing? Muslim and is it a Muslim?
You mean the Azerbaijan thing?
Yeah.
No, I don't know on that. I don't know what started the hostility.
Is Azerbaijan an Islamic country?
I don't know.
Don't think so.
I don't know.
I hear Jaunty's keys clicking.
I hear it. But anyway, to summarize, I think it's the abbreviation TBD, to be determined. That's where this whole thing is going, in my opinion, to be determined. Because I think things are so fluid now, and I'm not convinced the Ukrainians are making this fantastic.
I think you've described the whole world situation right now to be determined.
To be determined.
Yeah.
I agree. Okay. Thank you for letting me on your show. Have a good
Okay,
show.
wait a minute. One question.
Yes.
Do you think Xi Jinping will be crowned emperor in October?
I don't know too much about that, but I didn't know. I suspect, because it's the Communist Party, and he's the president, and so I'm pretty sure that if the Communist Party, which is a group of people, if they think he's doing a good job and they want to keep him on board, which I can't see anything that he has done. He hasn't showed up to work drunk. So I don't think.
Well, he might have, but we wouldn't have noticed.
Drunk on power, perhaps.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to fire him. I think they're going to proceed with this coronation thing, and it's going to be completely symbolic, and
Okay. Well,
I don't.
Thank you
but
for
also
the call.
another thing about China, quick thing. A week or 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, they did something where they gave power to the military somehow. I think the governing body of the CCP relinquished power, decision-making powers to the military. And I just read one little thing about that, and it went away.
I didn't see anything on that. But thank you for the heads up, Chuck. Great call.
It's worth the research. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Let's go quickly to Marcia in Los Gatos. Marcia, welcome.
Well, thank you so much, guys. You guys are so great. You started this China thing how long ago? Quite a while back, and now the world is watching. And there's always more to the story. And like with China and the sparrows, all the sparrows were gone, but what was gone? A lot of the poop that the sparrows were dropping on the ground.
All the fertilizer.
Right. But they, like to keep the streets clean in China. So what I'm saying is what we have to look at more to the story is what China's about is behavioral modification.
Amen.
That's what I'm watching.
Marcia.
Darling.
You must call sooner.
I know. Well, it's all about you guys, what you did for us today, and thank you forever.
Yes, well, thank you forever for the call. Really appreciate it. But you must call sooner.
Yes, darling.
Because love your voice. Okay, Marcia.
All right, darling.
Thank you very much. Well.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So, troops.
It's October 16th, Michael, when
October
the
16th.
Election is for Xi Jinping.
Good. In Azerbaijan?
Azerbaijan is mostly Muslim and Armenia is mostly Christian.
Yep. Well, there you go. We're back.
And the Artemis program is going to land on the moon in 2025.
Okay. And I am going to be there with it. So there it goes. Folks, China Watch Radio, thank you very much for tuning in. See you next week for more China Watching. Thank you.
KSCO Santa Cruz.